Now, today, more Extinction Rebellion protests are taking place once again in the capital after last week's targeted disruption of newspaper printers. Today, the group is meeting at a number of locations, including, as we speak here, outside News UK. Today, in both the Daily Mail and the Telegraph, an ex-spokesperson for the group, Xeon Lights, has contributed to describe the reasons why she left Extinction Rebellion to campaign for nuclear power. Xeon is the director of Environmental Progress UK. Joins me now to explain why she made this decision. Xeon, nice to have you with us. Hi.
Hi, Ian.
So, I mean, this is from an outsider's perspective. I'm sure you're going to tell me it's not such a seismic move, but lots of people would think, hang on, there you were as a high-profile campaigner for Extinction Rebellion. You did a lot of TV interviews, and you were seen around, campaigning for all that we know Extinction Rebellion stand for. And now you're campaigning for nuclear power. How does that work?
For me, it has been a natural progression, because one of the things I always noticed when I went on those protests and when I spoke to people in the media was that they would ask about solutions. And actually, that's sort of something Extinction Rebellion doesn't do. Now, obviously, they have got their 3 demands, and they've got their 3rd solution about citizens' assemblies and decisions being made that way. But that's more about kind of system change rather than tackling climate change. And I've always been interested in dealing with, what do we do with rising emissions? That's all tackling climate change is ultimately. So for me, it was a natural move to say, well, I'm going to go into solutions. What should I go into? You have a lot of proponents for rewilding, you have a lot of them for renewables. Nuclear is actually something that you don't have a lot of advocates for. It's quite controversial, which it shouldn't be. And especially in the environmental movement, it's a very heated topic. And I just felt like if I'm going to throw my weight behind anything, I'm going to do it behind this, because at the moment, we're still using a lot of fossil fuels. We use about 40% gas in the UK. Recently, during the heat wave, our wind production went down from 20% to 4% because the wind stopped blowing. We had to import coal. I just kind of think it's the 21st century. Why are we still burning coal? We can be better than that.
So nuclear is the, you're not the first to make the point. It is the kind of happy option, if you like, between where we'd all like to be ideally with windmills producing all of our energy. That can't happen. Clearly, meteorology doesn't allow it. And you've explained an example just this year. And nuclear is the future?
Absolutely. At the same time, I'm sad to say it, but the reason that part of the reason we don't have a lot of nuclear power is because people have campaigned against it. People who want good things for the environment have campaigned against it for years. Groups like Greenpeace, for decades, they've done it. And now you have France closing Fessenheim, one of their oldest reactors, 50 years of clean energy, and they closed it just because of public pressure, not because there was anything wrong with it. And you had Germany, obviously, if you're following what's happening there, they're closing all their nuclear plants, prioritizing that over phasing out coal. They put billions into renewables and had to then import coal to fill the gap. The emissions are going up. It doesn't make any sense.
Why
if you're
would they
concerned about these issues? You need to be pro-nuclear.
I mean, I'm not in this world I have no dog in this race at all, Xeon, but even I could see that what was happening in Germany seemed crazy.
People can get really embedded in their ideology and not look at the facts. And I'm going to go ahead and admit it and say I was one of those people. I really thought 100% renewables, it's going to happen. But the fact is that I believed that 15 years ago, and it hasn't happened. Despite investment, it hasn't happened. We have to look at the numbers and just go, this doesn't add up. We have to have a baseline clean energy option, and nuclear is it. And you know what? It could be really positive having it here, especially now, post-COVID recovery. If we get Sizewell built and Moorside built, that's a decision on that is kind of imminent, which is why I've been heavily campaigning for it at the moment.
What about
that's going to give us energy independence as well. It's going to give us thousands of jobs.
Wouldn't offshore wind, which can function differently, of course, to even when there's isn't that, and we know the government have had restrictions on that for a few years, so would that not free us up to move into non-nuclear and non-fossil fuel?
That can be part of the solution. But if you look at the IPCC report, the 1.5 warming report, which, organizations like Extinction Rebellion, they always direct people to these reports. Look at the energy section by Working Group 3, then it's not opinion, it's just numbers that have been crunched. How do we meet our current energy needs? And nuclear is in there, renewables is in there too, and nuclear is in there too. So we have to stop campaigning against it. and we have to invest in it. And I hear people say, well, it takes 6 to 10 years. Yeah, sure, that's a reason to have done it 20 years ago. Let's be honest, that's not a reason not to do it today. And actually, standardization brings down costs, and it increases, reduces the time that it takes to build new nuclear.
So this baptism of fire for being a high-profile figure in Extinction Rebellion to being a campaigner for nuclear power, I mean, was that just because somebody offered you six figures, or did you philosophically look at this and think, yeah, this is the way?
I wish I was on six figures. No, I philosophically, genuinely, so here's a bit of my story, and I have talked about this a lot. I actually kind of became pro-nuclear years ago, and I looked at research, and it was over Fukushima. People had told me tens of thousands of people had cancer from Fukushima. I just believed it. I was young. It's what your peer group tells you, just believe it. A scientist friend of mine sent me a paper showing the number of deaths. Fukushima, right? Even lots of people, when they hear it, they think lots of deaths from nuclear. That's not true. No one died from radiation. Over 500 people died. I think it was 573 in the evacuation process, due to panic because of their fear of nuclear. Over 50,000 people died from the actual tsunami. None of those deaths happened because of Fukushima. It's actually a complete myth. And when I realized that, I went, I'm going to look into this more. And the more I looked into it, I said, I actually can't be quiet on this. But what I found is that all the groups I've been part of, and I have been part of so many for 15 years, I've been involved in these different groups. No one wants to hear it. No one wants to hear it. And we've got to change that, because if we're not going for evidence-based solutions, then how are we going to fix anything? We can't go with just what our gut tells us.
Indeed.
Right. We've got to look at the research.
And on that point, does that mean you've revised other things that you once thought? I mean, there was I don't want to remind you of your Andrew Neil interview. I'm sure it wasn't a comfortable few moments when you sat there with Mr. Neil, and you have that feeling in common with many others. So there's a solidarity with people across all parts of the spectrum on that. But when you look back at that, you look at those kind of figures, the latest Extinction Rebellion movie that had to be re-edited because it contained some pretty graphic untruths in there. Do you realise then that actually this is not an organisation that should be taken seriously? Is that where you're at now?
I think the problem is that there isn't anyone else doing what they're doing. They occupy the space. So if you care about these issues, where else do you go? And obviously I left, so I'm not advocating that people join them, but I also know good people and I have friends in Extinction Rebellion, but they just feel like, what else can they do? Until we see some kind of action, they're just involved in that fight. And what I'm trying to do now is, again, focusing on solutions, trying to create a new movement that is just evidence-based environmentalism. Is it so radical, really? We're not going to block roads, we're not going to do anything awful. But although it's true that, we've done some banner drops so we founded Nuclear for Net Zero. And we did a banner drop, but it's true that it's hard to get press unless it is something that breaks the law.
But what about that, I mean, things I mentioned the print work rebellion at the weekend, which obviously then became a discussion about choking off freedom of the press, which for many people was a protest too far. That kind of thing. Do you look at that now and think these are kind of hopeless techniques from Extinction Rebellion?
I think that the truth is that the environmental movement has had so many different tactics for 30 years. We've known about the climate emergency, as we now call it, for over 30 years. Until you see emissions going down, none of it has worked.
But that doesn't mean to say that organisations can lie, does it? And that's been the accusation.
Well, but I mean, so going back to the Andrew Neil, that's what happened, right? Is I sat down in the chair, had all these figures in my head, all the things I wanted to say, and I was asked about 6 billion. Now, I never ever made that claim about 6 billion.
But
someone else in the
many in your
organisation
had, and that's the problem with XR.
And it was awkward, and it was difficult for me because I could have tried to defend it, right? But I didn't. But I also knew that as a spokesperson, I couldn't condemn it. So it put me in a really awful position. And this is why I left. This is why I ended up saying I can't be in that position. I can't do the work I want to do advocating for good solutions.
Do you think Extinction Rebellion are an organisation that lies to advance their cause? Would you be as strong as that?
I mean, obviously in that case, I really think they should have retracted it. They should have done a statement. And I was in those talks for weeks after it happened, saying, can we please do it? And no decision was made. And then I got thrown under the bus by being the one that was asked about it by Andrew Neil. I think they need to be really careful about actually, they say unite behind the science. They say listen to the IPCC. They need to stick to that, really. I think that's really important. But equally, I've never really seen that happen in any of these movements, and it's why I'm kind of a bit of a lone wolf in this space. But I'm seeing a lot of support for this space that I'm occupying. So I'm wondering if I can build something, fresh, an evidence-based, not politically aligned, evidence-based space for people to kind of maybe leave some of these other organizations that they're just in because they want to do the right thing, but maybe the tactics don't suit them. Maybe they don't want all the attacks from the public. Maybe they don't want to upset journalists. I mean, I've been a journalist for my entire career.
Sure.
I wouldn't like it if that happened to me.
Yeah. Do you feel you've left a cult?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there are people in there like that, but most of Extinction Rebellion is not like that. There's a small group of people who are like that, but I think you can find them in most organizations where they're just a little bit, I mean, they're the ones that were attacking me and I had to block them on Twitter, but most people have supported me, which I find really interesting because I think a lot of them do want a different option. They do want something better.
Sion, thank you. Sion Light, Director of Environmental Progress UK, former Extinction Rebellion, now campaigns for nuclear power. Never thought you'd hear that, speaking to us here on Talk Radio. I think she was very polite about the former organisation that she was part of, but I don't think it would be unreasonable to say that reading between the lines, she probably also thought, like many of us, this is a crock of dodge pots if ever there was one.